What if NECROZMA Dawn Wings was in Gen 1 Ubers? A Psychic and Ghost type. Do I even need to bother going over its stats or move pool? That alone is just kind of ridiculous. So you're resistant to Psychic and then immune to the best attacking type in the game? Are you serious? Immune to Explosion and Hyper Beam? That is... No! Not to mention, this thing has no weaknesses. And like, truly no weaknesses. Because even if there's a super scary bug move, like let's say there's like the nefarious hidden power bug pincer, Ghost, for whatever reason, resists bug. So it takes that neutrally. So this Psychic type is the one of the few with a true no weakness in RBY. And you know what? Even if with custom games we added the Dark type, Dark is coded to only hit things neutrally. And this is supposed to be a defensive Pokemon. Granted, not as defensive as Winala, I don't think. But it really doesn't matter. Look at this special attack stat that's higher than Mewtwo. In general, its stats are insane. But to be fair, this is also a Ubers video. So I don't think anyone's too surprised for me to say that. But speaking of which, 97 HP is pretty good for the time. Your lowest speed is 77. Now the past 2 days I have done the other NECROZMA forms. Base form didn't really care too much about its speed. Duskmane absolutely did. And that's because in Gen 1 Ubers, you can actually take advantage of its ground and fire weakness, which is why I think it's still really good, but probably the weakest out of all of the NECROZMA forms. Tomorrow I'm doing Ultra NECROZMA, so we'll see if the ice weakness is enough to keep that in check. But I'm going to make my bet now that this one's probably the best. It definitely has the best typing, because it's basically like base NECROZMA, where there's mostly no weaknesses, but then you replace, I guess, a weakness to bug with being immune to normal, which that alone is just that alone would make it great. Just being able to absorb normal attacks and not be like Gengar and worry about Psychic and Earthquake. You're actually resistant to Psychic, so that's not a concern. But yeah, but then you have 109 defense, 127 special defense, and in custom games, there's no special stat for new Pokemon. So it's using a special attack and defense simultaneously, which is probably a good thing. And then we get to the move pool. Now, even if we only use RBY moves, this thing would still be pretty good. Because I can imagine now, you just have Swords Dance, which is already really good on its own. Psychic for Stab. And then Earthquake, and then Thunder Wave. This would already be a extremely usable moveset. But I like to include signature moves. And there's 3 for NECROZMA. One of them isn't very good. I think I said for the base NECROZMA video that I was looking forward to using Moongeist Beam. But I take that back. I thought it was like Winala's attack. And if I remember correctly, I believe that should heal. No, it's just a 100 base power ghost move. Which, for RBY, where there's no abilities, that's kind of just useless. Since Ghost is a pretty bad offensive typing. Considering both normal and Psychic, due to a glitch, are immune to it. And if you're not healing, there's no reason to use it. Especially when Earthquake already has Stab, and Photon Geyser is also 100 base power. But the difference is that Photon Geyser, at least for Dawn Wing, since it's normally a special attacker, starts as a base 100 special move, but then if you have higher attack, it becomes physical, which is the exact same as Moongeist Beam at that point. So no reason to use it. Speaking of which, it's kind of funny, but thanks to you having Sword Stance and Photon Geyser being a strong attack, I actually don't think you need coverage that much. Granted, this is still a very versatile Pokemon, and you can have very different moves for it, but You'll see in some of the replays against the Psychics, but Sword Stance and Geyser, not even Earthquake, you can actually power through some of the Psychic types. And I think that's because most of them, except for Starmie, Mew, and Mewtwo, don't really have good defenses, which I find kind of interesting. But we have more than that. We have Thunder Wave if you want to just paralyze things, which is probably good considering your speed. Slash could be used for good consistent damage. Earthquake helps you hit things super effectively. Rest because you're unkillable basically anyways. And this is the first time I'm actually going to look over Prismatic Laser. I considered it for Dawn or Duskmane and for Base NECROZMA, but decided those two would be mostly primarily physical attackers. But Dawn Wings can absolutely take advantage of it. And yeah, let's just give Mewtwo a stab Psychic with technically even higher attack than Mewtwo. Yeah, this is going to be a disaster. And I think Dawn Wings, even if it had competition from the other NECROZMA forms, I'm willing to bet that this thing would go the anything goes. It just seems a little too good. Although granted, that might just be because there's only Mewtwo and Mew exactly. If there was a like a proper, I guess you can say, Ubers for Gen 1, where there's like the Creation Trio, Weather, the Gen 9 Legendaries, Gen 8, Gen 6, etc. This would probably be fine there, because you have a lot of different Legendaries, and they're not just using Psychic and normal attacks. But here, at least with just how things are in Ubers already, it's just way too good. And it can basically do whatever it wants. It can mostly get away with it. Because if nothing is really hitting this super effectively, and if it naturally has super offensive stats, what's really taking it on outside of Mewtwo exactly? And even with Mewtwo, this thing can absolutely annoy Mewtwo. So, that's just my guess. But is it as broken as I say? Only one way to find out. And we're starting with the king himself. We got Mewtwo. And I'll be honest, now that thanks to some of the comments, I've learned that Mewtwo sets are changing a lot. I'm not exactly sure what to do for moves. But for here, I think it's not a big deal. Seems like even when both boost each other, it's still a 3-hit KO. So that alone can already kind of put it in the NECROZMA's favor. Although Mewtwo being faster and with its attacks having status, that inherently kind of gives it an advantage. But you also have guaranteed status with Thunder Wave. But yeah, I forgot that technically Blizzard could be a damage range. So, I already knew that Blizzard has been being used more than Ice Beam anyways, but I think that's even more so now. In fact, considering Blizzard's actually one of the few ways to actually 2-hit KO NECROZMA, there's a good chance that it might just have to become a mainstay on Mewtwo, which isn't really the biggest deal in the world anyways, but yeah, if the NECROZMA's this much of a threat, you might have to adapt to it. And unlike Duskmane, it's not as easy as taking a fire move and then auto-winning. And then here we have Mew. Mew can go for Sword Stance, but it's not really that great. Granted, just like Mewtwo, it's still a 2-hit KO. So, definitely not winnable. But at the same time, Paralysis seriously messes you up. So I'm pretty confident that Thunder Wave probably has to stay in the NECROZMA's main moveset. Doesn't really seem like something you get rid of. But, But here's one that's a pretty big deal. Snorlax. Now, it only has Earthquake to hit you. And Geyser into Prismatic Laser is a very easy 2-hit KO. I think it's also worth noting that Prismatic Laser is pretty easy to spam. Because, for one, even if things are resisted, outside of Mewtwo and Mew, and I guess Chansey, what's casually gonna not take a lot of damage from Prismatic Laser? And even if you need to turn the recharge, you're so bulky and not scared of anything super effectively that you can probably tank the turn very, very easily. And then Executor is not really doing too much better. Executor only has Psychic, and it's not like Mega Drain's gonna do that much, and you're obviously immune to both Double Edge and Explosion. So yeah, that's kind of rough. You have Starrox and Executor as the 3rd and 4th best Pokemon, and if both of them straight up just can't hurt the NECROZMA by any means, that's not good. That alone should probably make it anything goes, because like it just makes it so easy to get in the field and into this wall. And as you see here, even with the Executor, I think we all agree is getting abysmal luck. I don't think it matters either, because even with Sweet Powder, the NECROZMA's probably fine. It would need to get hit. It would need to get hit with multiple special drops, and even then, you just switch out. Oh, by the way, even if the NECROZMA is a sweep, thanks to its awesome typing, it's also just a good pivot in general. So that's something. And here we have Tauros. I think technically, Blizzard, I don't think it does more damage than Earthquake, considering the NECROZMA has higher special defense than defense. But I'm also pretty sure you still go for it. Or you still go for Blizzard for the freeze. Also, yeah, Prismatic Laser. I don't know if it's a range, but at the very least, it's just not enough where you can use it on full HP Tauros. But the fact that it's close is already a huge deal. It means that Tauros takes any chip, and NECROZMA can just go in there and kill. And Chansey is not doing much better, because with Swords Dance, you have a physical psychic move, but thankfully I'm pretty sure that Chansey can survive barely. That's kind of funny, but there's also not really a counter or a reflect or nothing you can do that can really help that there. Chansey can maybe paralyze and put the NECROZMA half HP, but it's not really in danger. But speaking of danger, Photon Geyser already does a lot of damage, and if I went for Prismatic Laser, you better believe that would have OHKO'd. So, Gengar is really not doing anything either. But I guess with like a good special stat and a crit rate, it can do better than something like Rhydon. Rhydon's also just dead. Also, the fact that you don't even need Prismatic Laser, just the fact that you can threaten it, it's already pretty bad. And Swellbro. Now, this replay was actually one that's a best case scenario for Swellbro. There's no Slash and there's no Earthquake. I wanted to see if you can win with just the power through Photon Geyser alone. And you know what? With 2 Swords Dance, the damage isn't half bad. And you only need 2 Swords Dance while Swellbro needs 3 Amnesia. But also, as you can see there, once Swellbro does have max special, it's going to be faster than you and can probably 2-shot you. But at the same time, you also have Paralysis. So up until that last Amnesia, you're actually going to be faster. Still, I'm going to call this a could go either way. But one where if you just simply spec Earthquake, you auto-win. But even then, as you can see, even with a resisted hit, the NECROZMA has a chance of winning, even if it just has nothing that hits it for neutrally. Not even super effective. And then for Zapdos, I think Zapdos has a better time than most. It already has a high special stat, hits pretty decently hard, and with a good crit rate and paralysis. But it's still not great. It still takes a lot of damage, and we're not even talking about if the NECROZMA goes for Sword Stance. If that happens, it's basically all over. And yeah, Prismatic Laser was not enough to kill. I'll still be nice and could call this could go either way. But if I simply went for Sword Stance after paralyzing, that could have been enough to kill Zapdos, but I do not know. And then Jinx. Yeah, Blizzard. But as you can see there, it's not really hitting that great, I don't think. Sword Stance makes it pretty easy to kill. But do you need Earthquake for an OHKO? The answer is yes, you do. You definitely do. But it's also fine. You can just spec that in, and there's nothing to really worry about. In fact, you probably don't even bother with... Or you probably still bother with Thunder Wave, but I don't know. But what about Zam? Is it enough to kill Zam? Or do you still need to go for Earthquake? I definitely think it's less stressful since Seismic Toss isn't as threatening as, what's it called, Blizzard is. But you still need, like, it's still a 2-shot, but also it's still not a big deal. Not to mention with Sword Stance, you're faster. Which, you know, it's definitely a nice advantage, I think. So that's 2 Psychics down. And 1 more to go. Also, this is the first time these 3 Psychics are actually here. For the other 2 videos, I've actually been skipping them for replays. And that's just because for these NECROZMA replays and Ubers, there's just so much to go over that I just can't afford to make enough replays. Like, my laptop literally struggles to handle it. Kind of embarrassing, I know, but it's whatever. But as you see here, Starmie actually kind of does worse. Because it doesn't have good chip with Seismic Toss and no stab like Jinx's Blizzard. Kind of ironic considering it has the best defense out of the 3. And Jolteon, I think this is kind of just Zapdos, but worse? I think? Like, as you see there, like, a crit almost did half, but it's still a third. I don't know what to say about that one. It's just kinda, it's just Jolteon. But there's Prismatic Laser. Kills Cloyster. I don't think you're surprised. Let's keep moving on. We skipped a little bit. I think we kind of skipped through the C tiers. Here we have Aerodactyl and B-. I chose Aero over Sandslash mostly because I think it has a better special, but I also don't think it matters too much. Also, it's faster, but you really can't take advantage of it. It's not like Duskmane where you can thread in a critical Fire Blast and burn. Speaking of burn, to make up for not adding him with the Duskmane video yesterday, we have Charizard. Charizard and Moltres at the very least have strong Fire Blast and are faster, but I don't think it really saves them. Moltres it might. NECROZMA, I think Prismatic Light actually might kill given the damage range there. That's kind of funny. But here we go with the tier list, and you're going to see there is nothing bad here. This should actually be great, actually. Yeah, maybe you can put this in quickly away, but I don't really think you need to. Anything goes, straight up. This is just way too good. The best NECROZMA form, if I had to guess. But weirdly enough, even though Ultra NECROZMA has an ice weakness, I'm going to guess it's going to be better than Duskmane, which probably isn't too surprising. But I'm also going to guess it's going to be better than base form NECROZMA, which I don't know if that's the case, but I definitely think the stats should be enough to hard carry it. We'll have to wait and see. Tomorrow is going to be my 300th upload, by the way, so be there for that. I really like it when you guys support me. But until next time, this is Groundback, and I look forward to hearing from you.